Now we're going to go to a panel, something I'm really looking forward to. So I'd love to invite our panelists to come and join us. So Arshad Masih, the Senior Cloud Solutions Architect for Telco Cloud Platform from Vodafone Australia. Nilay Rathod, the Domain Lead of Orchestration, Integration, Inventory from Spark New Zealand. And Ben Panic, the Senior Director of Sales, Asia Pacific Telecommunications, Red Hat. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you all with us. You'd see, look, the sun's come up here in London. We've had some really fantastic presentations. And Ben, I'm going to start with you. We've heard the complexity, I think, from all of the speakers. You know, actually, this road isn't simple. It's not just about, you know, saying, okay, today we're migrating to cloud. Let's buy some equipment and turn it on. And I think Sandeep there made a very good point of actually, you've got to start small. Do you agree, Ben? Because, you know, I think sometimes you can oversimplify as analysts, as people who say, yeah, just migrate to the cloud.
Yes, if only it was that straightforward for us, Aaron, right? Let's just move everything to the cloud. We don't have, you know, legacy technology, and we don't have lifeline systems, do we? You know, so it is a complex environment that we're in. And I think Sandeep captured it really well. And, you know, possibly one of the other things that, you know, we all need to consider is the workforce, you know, and the way that we need to retrain our people to be able to deal with, you know, a cloud native environment. And I think, you know, Nilay will be able to touch on that, but I think that's really critically important. You know, we need to identify where we can start, take those small steps, prove the technology and the processes, and at the same time, bring our people along for that journey, because that's a really critical part as we begin to collapse network and IT into one single domain.
And I think that's a really good point. You know, Nilay, how are you doing that? How are you collapsing that, you know, the IT and the network domains together and starting on this migration?
Absolutely. So I was very fortunate that I started my career in IT, and our advantage of looking at Spark's telco cloud strategy for 5G. But if you look at our IT side of the stuff, Thomas mentioned a very simple thing, but it's very important that cloud native architecture is not about moving your traditional workload into container, but it's about decomposing your workload into microservice architecture, right? And I think we've done very well in IT side of the work. It's early days in network, but in IT, we have been able to look at most of our application, look at their roadmap, and how it basically looks like migrated into cloud native architecture. Last 2 years, we've migrated our integration application, essentially 220 integration services into cloud native open source architecture with Red Hat, and that's worked out very well. There's been challenges like Ben mentioned about culture, building the culture as part of transformation. People look at cloud native as a technology change, but it's very important that we train people, let them experiment the cloud native architecture or microservice world, and then migrate to the cloud native architecture as part of it. We're looking at starting a project to migrate our order management application into cloud native architecture as well. And if you look at benefits, they're really huge, right? You know, there's technology benefits, you know, and that's countless, right? We've seen that with cloud native architecture, there is options of moving to open source solution as well. So there's commercial benefits with integration. There was huge cost out, and with order manager migration, we're gonna see a huge cost out in future as well. Culture, which essentially people must thinking about. I can see that there's common competency building in IT application as we move towards open source and cloud native architecture. It used to be traditionally, it used to be very difficult to train people in proprietary application. If we move towards open source and cloud native architecture, you can have a common competency. And there's development friendly tools available in market that you can use to build that culture. And finally, not to mention customer as well. You can roll out changes faster in agile manner to help solve customers' problem, which it's traditionally been very difficult in monolith architecture. And if you look at network automation, so I come from IT, looking at network, it was a very different view altogether. Again, Thomas mentioned that we are not at the edge in the telco network like IT has been ahead in cloud native architecture. But what we are doing at Spark, we put together a 3 years program of view for telco cloud architecture and leveraging those IT principles to build software-defined network and unified telco cloud platform over a period of time.
So Arshad, over to you. You know, we heard Nilay there, you know, talk about some of the benefits maybe, and mention actually commercial benefits. You know, at Vodafone Australia, are you starting to see what the commercial benefits are for migrating over to the cloud? Because ultimately, on a balance sheet, the first thing that the business looks at is what are those commercial benefits? Are they really there for cloud yet?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's I always get scared when I go to finance. I'm just kidding. Anyways, so absolutely, if we just take a step back and talk some of the benefits that were the selling point with evolution of to SDN and NFI. Okay, we can have saving of this percent OPEX and this percent CAPEX and rolling out services quickly. So one thing that we need to realize that the benefits will not come overnight. It's a journey, it's an evolution. And then we have done a great bit of effort. We joined this NFVI and SDN journey early. We have learned our lesson, and we are, I would say, really advanced and forward into our journey with SDN and NFVI, where majority of our functions are already virtualized, and we are getting the benefits, I would say, at least in terms of the using common COTS hardware, where you name it. I mean, all prime telco functions and the security side, enterprise side functions running on a common platform. So simple calculation which I can do to get the realization of benefits that, okay, I got, let's say 100 number of functions. If they were black boxes, I need to buy this much of hardware infrastructure, right? And then in order to run that hardware infrastructure, I need to have this much resources. But now hardware infrastructure is common, right? So these are benefits. And then I do not need to worry about the hardware refresh cycles on bespoke or vendor specific boxes. I need to run still the lifecycle management on infrastructure, but that's happening on a common infrastructure. It's happening on a common platform. It's happening with a common principle. So these are benefits that we are already realizing. And then, as I mentioned, it's a journey. Step toward cloud native, where the realization of benefits will come with introduction of more automation in place, more capabilities in place. If we talk about, and just for the sake of comparison, take example of AWS, Microsoft or Google or any other public cloud. What distinguish them? How they roll out services quickly, how they offer services at the need of speed, because they have developed strong capabilities, ecosystem of capabilities which enable them. And that's the analogy that as a telco, we need to mimic, and we are trying to mimic, if not exactly public cloud, but at least we adopt those model which help us to realize now these benefits, where we have come closer to cloud native, and then with evolution to 5G. Architecture is totally changing. Service oriented architecture, introduction of containers, microservices. Then the one question which keeps me awake is, are we ready for that? Because
that's a good question, Arshad. You know, are we ready? And sorry to cut you off,
Yep.
just to move through. Just to remind all the delegates as well, if you've got any questions, please do put it into the Q&A box, because I'm more than happy to and be delighted to take those questions. But Arshad, I just want to build with Ben on something you said, and we'll come back. You know, you're talking about the benefits, but one thing that I've not heard yet, and that really excites me about moving towards, you know, the cloud, Ben, it's about innovation, the fact you can innovate at the edge, the fact you can bring technology partners together with other service providers. I mean, you know, we heard, you know, earlier on today, you know, we had Intel and Red Hat talking. I mean, that's innovation, right? That's the community really working together, you know, with Thomas and Michael. So Ben, do you think this allows innovation?
Absolutely, right. I mean, this is what I'm really excited about. The innovation that the ecosystem drives. I mean, it's back to what Sandeep said. This is a journey, right? This doesn't happen overnight. And, you know, we look to open source and we see huge innovation, and that's what we need to really bring into the telecommunications sector. So being able to leverage open source and then the ecosystem that gives you, right? That flexibility of choice. And I think that's clearly, you know, the biggest carrot for all of us is to be able to identify, what are some of those new business to business or business to consumer, but I personally think it's the B2B use cases that are going to drive new revenues for the operators in the industry. Being able to monetize the network and the edge is going to be critical for operators as we move forward. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is leverage the ecosystem. You're going to need an open horizontal telco cloud to do that. You can't do that where you're locked in to a vertical stack. And you need to be able to expose that through private and public clouds as well, right? If you want to be able to spin up workloads on Azure or AWS, you need to be able to do that. So that underlying infrastructure needs to be open and the ecosystem around that needs to be diverse. That's where Red Hat's working really closely with our ISV and NEP partners to ensure that we certify those workloads and give our customers, risk-free choices as they move towards that development. Something I'm really excited about for us as we move towards those 5G deployments and the edge use cases.
And Nilay, I want to come to you on this because, we hear the telco industry is a little bit, I have to say, behind and a little bit skeptical of open source. I think particularly we worry about quality of service. I think, in the past when we've talked about open source, actually it's not that open. It's kind of one community, versus another community. How at Spark News are you viewing open source? Do you see it as this panacea of innovation, which is what Ben, is saying, or are you a little bit more cautious on that journey?
I guess we ran talking about transformation. We ran a 5 years long transformation program. We migrated all our product journeys, mobile, broadband, business data, enterprise connectivity into a future architecture over 5 years. So we have re-engineered our IT stack. And that gives us a lot of benefit. Now we can look at how we want to invest into. The unfortunate thing is that the time we were doing re-engineering, those applications were not cloud native. But the benefit is that the end-to-end architecture is established now, so we can focus on picking those components and then migrate that to cloud native architecture. In network, we had, like Ben mentioned, we had traditional challenges. We've got 5 vertical implementation. We're trying to move away from that. We want to establish a unified telco cloud where you've got single horizontal platform, which is suitable for all the VNF or multi-vendor VNFs that we have got in Spark. Again, there are challenges. Certification is new. There has been certification process, which is costly and which is time consuming. We're trying to have those difficult conversations with vendor and saying that, you need to be open, you need to be interoperable. I think there's a movement, but I see some of those conversations are still difficult at the point of time in networks.
Absolutely, and I think Ben, I'm sure you want to talk about the certification side because it does actually start to become important, but it can be quite cumbersome. Nilay, I agree, because you're waiting, it just adds time. And when we're talking about from 18 months to 18 days, actually, the certification process can add to that. We've got a great question though that's come in from the audience, so I want to make sure we get to that. And Arshad, I'll give you first option to be able to answer. And I think it's a great one. And I have to say, Ashutosh Agrawal, who asked the question, what a great one. And I've actually saved it because I'm going to ask this question later on something else I'm doing, because I think it's a really great one, but I'll give you full credit. And it's true. How do you control the API anarchy when using microservices across hybrid cloud ecosystems? I think this is the thing, just talking about moving things to APIs isn't, again, like with cloud, it's not that simple. And I think, Arshad, how do you manage the complexity of lots and lots of APIs running across, your systems in hybrid environments?
I think if we talk about IT ecosystem, and obviously the adoption of APIs or open APIs was done way back, and there's no doubt about the benefits are proven. Whether you talk about the applications, load balancing, or communicating between different functions, different domains, different application communicate. If you have open APIs, if you can communicate through a unified protocol, then obviously there's a uniform approach. You do not have to worry about writing let's say, different plugins and communicating in a totally different language to different API servers and things like that. But the adaptation of APIs on telco side, I would say that the northbound OSS or BSS stack, and with the evolution to cloud native and especially with service oriented architecture that has been introduced with 5G, the importance of API has become really evident, which means that imagine that if RAN as a domain has to get some services from core function, or core need to get some services from the infrastructure. If we can communicate through APIs in a common way, that's what make this service realization really fast, agile, and then realization of services could be quickly. But on the other side, the complexity that comes with this ecosystem, it's not only within the organization. Then the partners or your technology partners you are communicating, you're working with, you're collaborating with, you're co-creating values with, are they also ready? But today, I just take one example. If I talk about Mano 3GPP architecture, if I would talk 2 or 3 different mainstream vendors, you would be surprised to see the level of maturity in terms of APIs will be different. When you wanted to talk, you spend months and months on integrating and then fixing issues. And then you end up saying that, oh, this is some wrapper that you have to develop to talk. So then I think the power of open source and community behind that, in my opinion, is a key. And that's what, to some extent, address the complexity and then the uniformity issue that we are facing with evolution to cloud native and the introduction of API or heavy API driven environments.
And hopefully there'll be TM Forum open APIs, which are developed, by the industry for the industry to help with that integration. I had to get that shameless plug in there. Nilay, how are you managing the complexity of API integration across, multiple environments?
I definitely echo you. This is a very good question. I'm starting to worry about this already when we start migrating order management into open source architecture, because what we're signing up for essentially is a service mesh. There's a cluster of API. I want to make sure that it doesn't become a custard at the end of the day, right? The way I think about API is there's 2 sets of API, right? If I think about order management, there's in microservice architecture, there's API that within the component that we need to expose, so that a component if you think about Kubernetes architecture, a namespace, but there's an API that is not exposed outside of the namespace, but it's exposed within the component so that the microservice can talk to each other. There has to be documentation. There's ways to document it, like using Swagger, etc. Right? So a team who's looking after the component can look at the API and look at the changes, etc. Now, it gets complicated when you think about end-to-end architecture, where there's multiple components and these APIs exposed to communicate between each other. I think the best way, like you mentioned, open APIs and standardizing the API is a very good way to manage those API. Also, this is where API management suite could be very useful, right? Where there's communication required between teams, you can use the power of documentation with API management, and also collaboration features of API management to communicate the API changes between different teams. And you can organize, there's a lot of features in API management we've discovered that could help to increase the amount of collaboration. You can create a different catalogs of API, order management APIs, billing APIs, customer management APIs, so that it's easy to access and it's not overwhelming for team to understand them. It's often a challenge when someone onboards in the team and says that, can you explain me the APIs? Well, there's 220 APIs you want to look at, right?
No, exactly. I think that is half the challenge. Ben, I'm going to dial it back a little bit, just so I didn't get a chance to ask you this question. But I think, Nilay really mentioned a really great point earlier on. So I do want to make sure we have time to ask you. It's about the certification, about people understanding actually that there is a standardized approach. You are interoperable, you are conforming. So, I know you do quite a lot of certification, in Red Hat, but, as Nilay said, it can sometimes be a little bit cumbersome and delay. So what are you doing to tackle that in terms of certification? Is there a way to make it a little bit easier?
Well, it's a process, right? That life cycle management that we're undertaking with our ISV partners and the large NEPs is something that's ongoing. It's not something that we just do once, and we're continuing to invest and build out in our labs globally and work with those partners. So we'll be doing lab work inside of Red Hat or inside of IBM or inside of our NEP partners like Ericsson to ensure that those certifications are ongoing. And as our customers move from one release to another, they can be sure that it has been certified and those workloads are going to operate in the same way they did before. So it's really an ongoing process, and one that we're fully invested in for our clients.
We've got another great question that's just come in. I think this is really, really critical when we talk about migrating to the cloud hybrid environments. Arshad, I'll start with you. I'll always start with you as we go through
I'm
this.
happy to take.
But this has come from Seong NP, who is asking, when we talk about 5G, and then we can extrapolate that to anything, right? Migrating all these virtualized architectures, how do you know the equipment, deployee, the person, is safe and secure, such as the software, the APIs, as the hardware, so if you're migrating with, HP, Cisco, Riverbed, I'm sure Red Hat, anybody, is security now becoming a real concern because you're getting much less control out of it?
I think this is a great question, and the question become even more relevant and significant if you talk about the security issues, which whether you talk about cyberspace and the threat that has been increased over time. So, and this has always been a debate about security in public cloud versus the on-prem cloud. If you take probably a step back, maybe 10 years back, with the evolution to AWS, Microsoft, and other cloud platforms, at that time versus now, the trust and security confidence has increased, I would say. But having said that, every country, every environment have some, I would say that security requirement, governance framework, which allows you to take care when you're building your data center, for instance, SDN and FAI or cloud native data centers infrastructure, then what you need to make sure that you comply. So that's the first check that you wanted to do as a if you are providing telco cloud, especially on-prem. And then obviously for the public cloud, each government, I would say that there is a set of requirement here in Australia, we call the TSSRs requirement coming from government that we comply as a service provider if you are using cloud, if you are providing on-prem cloud. So these are some of the important aspects. But security obviously has become a very, very key task, and also a bit complex with evolution to cloud native. One of the step on this journey, while you're still exploring, let's say, containers on bare metal, you could start introducing containers on VM. That's one of the strategy which many telco has adopted, which means that that the VMs are already secured. You're using this infrastructure for VNFs already, and you're building a layer on top of that, providing containerized applications. So in this way, you will not be able, you will be providing a secure environment and infrastructure, but at the same time, you will be exploring different challenges that may come when you evolve from, let's say, providing containers on VM to containers on bare metal.
Nilay, how do you respond to that? Is this security challenge a big issue for you?
I guess I'll talk about the brighter side of it. I think I should cover that. We need to make sure that the solution we deploy is compliant, and need to do trust verification more often to make sure that the equipment is secure. But if you look at the cloud native architecture, the benefit on the other side is that there's various security testing software that's available, whether it is static security testing or dynamic security testing software that you can use to verify the image of a software before it's deployed onto the equipment or on a platform, right? We've been starting doing that in IT, in cloud native application, which is like web portal or mobile app. We're making sure that before, this is an ongoing challenge with cloud native architecture because you're rolling out changes faster to market. you need to make sure that your security testing is powerful enough to keep up with the life cycle that you're introducing in your delivery chain as well, right? So I would say security application testing and the dynamic application testing is way forward for all the vulnerability testing right now.